This sermon is about the resurrection, still ongoing, the invitation to realize the moment. On Wednesday morning at 5:30 our time, 10:30 England time, and those are in the morning, I was joining in my Aunt Barbara's funeral service. It took place in Durham in the northeast of England. It was a small gathering under COVID regulations. I could not see or hear or be there. Jack and Barbara, my uncle and aunt, lived in the city to which I went to begin university. I was 18, really about 15 years too young to make the best of what was given to me. Jack and Barbara invited me often for lunch on the weekend. They were kind and gentle and knew, without ever letting me know, that they were giving me a place of support and quiet teaching as I began to leave home and enter the world. They were people of deep, effective, quiet faith in Christ, as is my cousin Jennifer also. Jack died some years ago before I found my way to make friends with Jennifer, my cousin. Knowing Jennifer now, both of us quite old now, brought me much more into the truth of Barbara's journey into death. Why didn't I enter into Jack's? Perhaps because I wasn't really awake to death at that point. Being awake to death is not easy. The only certainty we have in life, along with taxes, someone said, is death, and we avoid it. We avoid letting death into the garden of our soul. Nobody wants a 12-foot cross rising up out of the flower bed. They'd much rather just have flowers. Luke's Gospel reading today is often called the Walk to Emmaus. And it really is still caught up between death and life for the two disciples who are walking. Neither life nor death have settled into the garden of their souls. In the same way that on Easter Monday morning, Mary actually realized it. Realized sometimes being explained as seeing with real eyes. And it was only after Jesus, with whom she'd been talking for a while, called her by name, that Mary woke up and saw what was in front of her eyes. For the disciples walking along to Emmaus, this stranger is an interesting man, poking about into their grief, asking for their story, but their eyes are on the ground. How much we don't see. The COVID confinement, for example, many of us see as something we're trying to look beyond, look past, waiting to the end. It doesn't occur to us to look directly at the confinement. You get to see yourself undistracted and unhurried. You get to see your family if you live with them. You get to see your death if you can allow yourself down that path. But mostly we seek distraction, diversion, and finding ways around things, or just longing for the end. I've sent out a poem before called COVID, and here it is again. I want to read it slowly. What if you thought of it as the Jews consider the Sabbath, the most sacred of times? Cease from travel, cease from buying and selling. Just give up for now on trying to make the world different than it is. Sing, pray. Touch only those to whom you commit your life. Center down. And when your body has become still, reach out with your heart. Know that we are connected in ways that are terrifying and beautiful, and you could hardly deny it now. Know that our lives are in one another's hands. Surely that has come clear. Do not reach out your hands. Reach out your heart. Reach out your words. Reach out all the tendrils of compassion that move invisibly where we cannot touch. Promise this world your love, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, so long as we all shall live. That's Lynn Ungar. She wrote it on the 3rd of November. No, on the 11th of March. Lynn Ungar has woken up to COVID. She has chosen to refuse the diversions and the denials and the negotiating we use to pretend not to see the really scary possibility that you or I or someone we love will die gasping for breath. And when you can dare to see that, the wonderful value of living, consciously living, can emerge. You may not be able to hold your grandchild through the glass window, but you can smile and sing and cry tears of love. You may not be able to ride the TTC and be busy and effective, but haven't you longed for the time to be still? Time to do those things which you really want to do? Time to touch another soul? Time to say, I love you, to the person who you love. Perhaps the disciples were discussing how unfair it had been on that road to Emmaus. Who was to blame? What the outcome should have been? Or even how God was going to get revenge on those bad guys? Perhaps they were trying to figure out whether to just go home to their own villages and hope they didn't get arrested. Or maybe disappear into Egypt for a bit until it cooled down. And even as Jesus explained the theology and the prophecy, their heads were so thick with words and worries and the fatigue of grief and loss that they couldn't hear. Just like Mary's eyes, so rimmed with tears, she couldn't see. She couldn't see him right in front of her. I did not see my Aunt Barbara as she got older, and then unwell, and then sick and sicker. What was real for me was Jennifer. My parents have both died. My grief for them was particular, as was Jennifer's for her mother. However, I know enough of both that I could imagine a little Barbara's dying, and I could feel Jennifer's grief and echo it in my own. We talked of angels, of God. It occurred to me, and I mentioned it to Jennifer, that Barbara's soul might soar, not as an angel depicted in a church window, heavily overdressed and clearly not designed for flight, but as a seagull. We've had seagulls on the lake. Seagulls have such joy in flying, in cruising high, in folding to dive, or simply playing in the wind. I can see the Spirit of God in seagulls. And I can see Barbara lifted up from death and caught up into the freedom of the heights of love. Flying, wings outstretched and laughing in the gusts as with smiling eyes she looks upward to the light of Christ rushing to meet her, resurrected. In the first letter of Peter, our first reading today, Peter just can't wait to escape the Judaism that he calls the futile ways inherited from our ancestors. He is seen with real eyes, and he can't wait to get away from rules and regulations. And he says to his friends, now that you have purified your souls by the obedience to the truth, so that you have genuine mutual love. Love one another deeply. Deeply from your heart. You have been born anew, he says. They're resurrected. This Easter season is passing with the dullness of COVID time, but it could be honoured with Lynn Ungar's sense of awakened heart and soul. Could it be a few weeks in which you have solitude and undistraction to let the changed heart and spirit we see in the Emmaus story be something that you could try on? Could it be a thought? Am I already raised up? I already have the wings that unglue me from the gravity of duty and fear? You are not required to become a glowing saint that hardly anyone recognizes anymore, And that is a tedious existence anyway, if not for you, then definitely for your friends and family. You are invited to know that already God's breath waits for you. God waits for you to look upon the seagulls in flight, and in heart and spirit do something of the same beauty with the rest of your life, your new life, your resurrection. Amen.